Good morning. I'm Alex with your sports update for Monday, May 19th, 2025. All times are in UK GMT. Here are today's key events. At 0900, tennis. Early rounds begin in Hamburg ATP, Geneva ATP, Strasbourg WTA, and Rabat WTA tournaments. At 1000, cricket. Surrey face Yorkshire in Day 4 of the County Championship. At 1200, horse racing. Live coverage from Newmarket, Stratford and Naas. At 1400, cricket. Lucknow Super Giants take on Sunrisers Hyderabad in the Indian Premier League. At 1400, ice hockey. Tractor Chelyabinsk meet Lokomotiv Yaroslavl in the KHL. At 1420, ice hockey. France plays Slovenia in the IAHF World Championship. At 1420, ice hockey. Germany face Czech Republic in the IAHF World Championship. At 1445, football. CSKA 1948 host Krumovgrad in Bulgaria's Parva Liga. At 1500, cricket. Islamabad United play Karachi Kings in the Pakistan Super League. At 1530, basketball. Wielkie Morskie Szczecin face Trefl Sopot in Poland's PLK. At 1545, basketball. Hapoel Haifa meet Hapoel Afula in Israel's Super League. At 1600, football. Hapoel Ramat Gan play BNEI Yehuda Sport in Israel's Liga Lumit. At 1600, football. Maccabi Herzliya take on Hapoel Petah Tikva in Israel's Liga Lumit. At 1600, football. Hapoel Kfar Saba face Hapoel Tel Aviv in Israel's Liga Lumit. At 1600, football. Albania U17 meet Portugal U17 in the UEFA U17 European Championship. At 1600, basketball. Basishehir Kaleci play Merkez Efendi Belediyesi Denizli Basket in Turkey's Super League.
At 1600, basketball. CSM-CSU Oradea face XO Voluntari in Romania's Liga Națională.
At 1700, football. Brøndby take on Midtjylland in Denmark's Superliga. At 1700, football. Widzew Łódź play Pusa Neapolamis in Poland's Ekstraklasa. At 1700, football. Miedź Legnica meet Nisieksa in Poland's I-Liga. At 1700, football. Landskrona face Helsingborg in Sweden's Superettan. At 1700, football. Mjällby play Brommapojkarna in Sweden's Allsvenskan. At 1700, football. Sirius take on Norrköping in Sweden's Allsvenskan. At 1700, football. Djurgårdens meet IFK Göteborg in Sweden's Allsvenskan. At 1700, motorsport. IndyCar Series holds practice session 11 at Indianapolis Motor Speedway. At 1700, snooker. The Ultimate Pool Champions League continues with last 16 matches. At 1700, basketball. Lokomotiv Kuban play Zenit Petersburg in the VTB United League. At 1700, ice hockey. Rimouski Oceanic face Moncton Wildcats in the QMJHL playoffs. At 1710, football. Elfsborg take on Djurgården in Sweden's Allsvenskan. At 1715, football. Slavia Sofia meet Lokomotiv Plovdiv in Bulgaria's Parva Liga.
At 1730, football. Rapid București play CFR Cluj in Romania's Liga E.
At 1730, football. Lokomotiv Moskva face CSKA Moskva in Russia's Premier League. At 1730, football. Beitar Jerusalem take on Hapoel Beersheva in Israel's Ligat Ha'el. At 1730, football. Maccabi Haifa meet Maccabi Tel Aviv in Israel's Ligat Ha'el. At 1755, basketball. Elitzer Maccabi Netanya play Ironi Kiryat Atta in Israel's Super League. At 1800, football. Racing face Miramar Misiones in Uruguay's Primera Division. At 1800, football. Kazank Barsica take on Mezikov Zori in Hungary's NB2. At 1800, basketball. Trento play Olimpia Milano in Italy's Liga A. At 1800, handball. SC Magdeburg meet Hannover Bergdorf in the Handball Bundesliga. At 1830, football. Germany U17 face France U17 in the UEFA U17 European Championship. At 18:30, football. Salernitana take on Frosinone in Italy's Serie B. At 18:30, football. Cordoba play Mirandes in Spain's Segunda Division. At 18:30, motorsport. Bellevue Aces race Leicester Lions in the British Premiership. At 18:30, basketball. Trapani face Reggiana in Italy's Liga A. At 18:45, football. Shelbourne meet Drogheda United in Ireland's Premier Division. At 18:45, basketball. Brescia play Trieste in Italy's Liga A. At 18:20, ice hockey. Canada take on Finland in the IIHF World Championship. At 18:20, ice hockey. Hungary face Norway in the IIHF World Championship. At 1900, football. Shamrock Rovers play St. Patrick's in Ireland's Premier Division. At 1900, football. Union Española meet Everton in Chile's Primera Division. At 1900, football. Brighton and Hove Albion take on Liverpool in the English Premier League. At 1915, football. Stjarnan face Vikingur Reykjavik in Iceland's Besta Deild Karla. At 1915, football. Breiðablik play Valur in Iceland's Besta Deild Karla. At 2200, football. Argentinos Juniors meet San Lorenzo in Argentina's Primera División. At 2200, football. Boston River take on Cerro in Uruguay's Primera Division. At 2200, football. Colorado face Ñublense in Chile's Primera Division. At 2200, golf. The NCAA Women's Individual National Championship concludes. At 2240, baseball. Miami Marlins play Chicago Cubs in MLB. At 2240, baseball. Pittsburgh Pirates face Cincinnati Reds in MLB. At 2245, baseball. Boston Red Sox meet New York Mets in MLB. At 2300, rugby union. Pampas 15 take on Selknam in the Superliga Americana de Rugby. At 2300, football. Llaneros play Deportes Tolima in Colombia's Primera A. At 2300, basketball. Internacional RS face Palmeiras in Brazil's Brasileiro Feminino. At 2305, baseball. Tampa Bay Rays meet Houston Astros in MLB. At 2330, ice hockey. Dallas Stars play Winnipeg Jets in the NHL. At 2340, baseball. Milwaukee Brewers take on Baltimore Orioles in MLB. At 2340, baseball. Minnesota Twins face Cleveland Guardians in MLB. At 2340, baseball. Chicago White Sox meet Seattle Mariners in MLB. At 2345, baseball. St. Louis Cardinals play Detroit Tigers in MLB. At 0000, wrestling. WWE Monday Night Raw airs live. At 0000, basketball. Dallas Wings W face Seattle Storm W in the WNBA. At 0000, basketball. New York Knicks take on Boston Celtics in the NBA. At 0000, rugby union. RFC Los Angeles play Chicago Hounds in Major League Rugby. At 0030, football. La Serena meet Deportes Iquique in Chile's Primera Division. At 0030, football. Boca Juniors face Independiente in Argentina's Primera División. At 0040, baseball. Colorado Rockies play Philadelphia Phillies in MLB. At 0100, football. Alianza Lima take on Alianza Universidad in Peru's Primera Division. At 0105, football. Medellin play Deportivo Pereira in Colombia's Primera A. At 0145, baseball. San Francisco Giants meet Kansas City Royals in MLB. At 0205, baseball. Oakland Athletics face Los Angeles Angels in MLB. At 0210, baseball. Los Angeles Dodgers take on Arizona Diamondbacks in MLB. That concludes today's sports bulletin for Monday, May 19th, 2025. For live updates,